Hi, everyone. Today I have with me Dr. Katie Thomson Aiken, fellow naturopathic doctor, a good friend of mine, and someone who loves talking about anxiety. Welcome, Katie. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Anne.
Okay, so first things first, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
All right. So, for those of you who haven't met, as Anne said, my name is Katie, and I'm a naturopathic doctor. And I got into naturopathic medicine when I was a child. And so I was a sick kid. I had a lot of ear infections, asthma. My mom was constantly taking my brother and I in and out of the emergency room, and sitting through a lot of tube surgeries for ear infections. And she was just like, there's got to be something else out there. And that is when she took us to see a naturopathic doctor. And I was completely enchanted with my naturopath. I thought that she was like the coolest lady. And I went home and I started playing naturopathic doctor. And I was like, I'm going to be a naturopathic doctor when I grow up. And I changed my mind a few times along the way, but I kept being drawn back to this profession, and mostly because of the idea that we have within us the ability to heal our bodies. And naturopathic medicine, as I'm sure all of you know from working with Anne, is about removing those barriers so that we can find the health that's sitting there underneath us. And I find this to be really true in anxiety. We all have access to calm in every moment. We just have things in the way of us experiencing it. And so in my practice, what we do is we excavate what are those things that are in the way of us accessing our calm, so that we can push those aside so we can spend more time in peace, in calm, in comfort, and less time in anxiety, stress, and fear.
Okay, so let's pick on something that you just said and roll with that. So you said that we have things that get in the way of accessing that calm. What are some of those things that do get in our way?
For sure. Yeah, you mean besides global pandemics?
Yeah. Yeah, we're recording this during the physical distance times of COVID-19. So, yes, besides that, what gets in the way?
Yeah. So, but I will start with that as a basis, in to say that our life circumstances can influence our experience of anxiety. And so when things are moved out of the normal, or when we have stressors in our life, that's definitely something that we look at. And while we have a collective stressor right now that's causing a lot of folks a lot of stress, I think it's important to remember that individuals have stresses as big as this going on in their life at all the time. And so there's always people that are managing stress in a big way, and we are all managing stress right now. And some of the other things that we look at are is blood sugar. And so find that to be a really big piece in managing anxiety. The other things we look at is other hormonal systems. So we look at cortisol, at thyroid hormones, at female hormones, and making sure that those are balanced, because any one of those disbalances can influence our mood and how we're feeling. And then I also look a lot at nutrition and nutritional pillars. Sometimes when we're depleted in nutrients, we get anxiety as well. So I tend to help people go through an anxiety typing quiz. And so when nutrients are low, and we're very tired, that tends to manifest in more of a fatigue type anxiety. When our blood sugar is imbalanced, a lot of times that manifests in decision anxiety, because that's from a lack of routine, a lack of structure in our day-to-day lives, can sort of manifest in this decision type anxiety with the blood sugar imbalance. And when it comes to things like hormones and cortisol, I often see that in defensive anxiety. And that sort of shows up when we feel like our back's against the wall and we're needing to protect ourselves. That's when our anxiety comes up. A lot of times that's a cortisol type anxiety response. And that's definitely the first place that I look to balance in that sort of anxiety archetype.
Okay. And I love that you painted this picture of like what different anxieties can look like. What are some other signs and symptoms that we can have when we experience anxiety, especially like acutely? How does that show up in the body?
Yeah, so everyone has an experience of anxiety. It's a universal human emotion. And so we're never trying to get rid of anxiety entirely because it's part of what it means to be human and it's our body's way of making us safe. But we do need to watch out for anxiety that's overreactive. So that's too much than the response that we need to keep us safe in the situation, or anxiety that we can't move through. If something's happening and we experience fear because something's scary, that's normal. What we don't want to do is be stuck in that fear and not able to move on with our day. And this can show up in the body in a lot of different ways. A lot of people think of anxiety as thoughts, as worrying, and that's certainly a part of it. You can have worrying thoughts. You can also have repeating thoughts and racing thoughts. So just like unable to stick to a single thing because things are just like pinging all over your brain. That's definitely a thought process. But then in the body, there's a lot of symptoms of anxiety. Some people get shortness of breath, difficulty breathing. You might feel your heart racing, the anxiety. Some folks feel like a lump in the throat. That can be acute anxiety. Tension headaches are one I see a lot in my practice. So like getting all up like this. And that can be really stressful and really anxiety provoking, and a way that it shows up in the body that people don't always attach to anxiety. The other places to look for physical symptoms are in the digestive systems. You can get bloating, butterflies, sore stomach, loss of appetite, increase in appetite, then also loose stools, and adjacently also having to pee a lot. So that can be a sign of anxiety. The body's just aggravated and it's not holding anything. It's just like letting things out, in terms of like our bathroom habits. I think that's kind of the majority of the symptoms head to toe. I mean, everyone's got a unique, most people don't have every single one of those. They'll have like a couple that they most commonly experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely I see this in practice also and experience it myself. I am someone who, like, there's a lot of like thoughts for sure, and then there's tension in here. And then acutely, if something is coming up, then I'll also feel the butterflies in my stomach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. My sensitivity is definitely in my digestive system. I get stomach aches, and that's something that's been happening ever since I was like a little girl. I had a classroom that was a stressful place to be in, and I would get stomach aches and have to go home. And they were really bad. My doctor actually sent me for a barium swallow to try and, which is for those of you watching that don't know what that is, it's a drink that they use to scan the stomach for, they were looking for stomach cancer. And it was normal, I was fine. It was just anxiety, which just goes to show you like how real this can be, even in children.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk about children for a second? Because I know
Yeah.
a lot of my audience, like they have kids. And I know
Mm-hmm.
in my practice, I see a lot of stomach aches that are actually anxiety versus like actual, something going on in the digestive tract physically or food wise. What do you see in children that you might be seeing in your practice or that you've encountered?
Yeah.
What does anxiety show up like in children and from your own experience too?
For sure. Yeah. So children often don't have the words to express when they're afraid, and they experience real symptoms in their bodies. And so this is not psychosomatic. They are not making it up. This is real pain that needs to be addressed as pain, but then also as the underlying cause when it is anxiety. And the two most common ways that children express their anxiety through their bodies is stomach aches and headaches. And so while we want to evaluate to make sure that there isn't something else going on in both of those cases, looking at the type of pain, when it happens, and what else is going on, particularly around when it started, can help tease out anxiety from other causes of pain. So in terms of stomach aches, children will have like a normal physical exam when it's from anxiety. They also tend to point like to the middle of their tummy, so they'll point to their belly button, which is a very unusual point to have like a pathogenic or like a disease in your stomach around your belly button. That tends to not be it. So when kids are saying that their tummy hurts, they're pointing to their belly button. That's one of the things that we think that might be more anxiety related. And then also watching for the time of when this started and when it comes up. So if they're getting it every time they're supposed to be practicing piano, or if they're getting it every time they have to go to school, if they have a spelling test that day, it's a good idea to track it and see when this is happening, to understand if it's correlated to something that's maybe more anxiety related. And same with the headaches. They'll just say that their head hurts everywhere rather than pointing to like, an attention headache. You might like feel it in your jaw, or you might feel like the back of your neck. Kids will just say that like their whole head hurts. They won't be able to describe the pain really. Like a lot of times they won't have descriptive words to explain. Now that can, depending on the age of the child, that can be normal anyway. And again, watching for when is that happening. And making sure that it's not like a vision problem or something else going on. But yeah, is that helpful?
Yeah, that's super helpful. It's so true. Like with kids, they don't have the ability to communicate clearly what's happening. So
Mhm.
investigating around like when it started and when it actually does happen, if there's any sleep disturbances too, because a lot of these kids also will ruminate at night over the same, like similar to adults, right? We ruminate over a lot of things, so they will as well. So also checking for sleep disturbances or changes in appetite can be super helpful to figure out if it is anxiety or if it is like nervousness or if it's something other than that that's going on in the body.
For
So
sure. And there are standardized inventories just for kids for anxiety, like the SCARED questionnaire that can help you. And if the child is pre-literate, so they can't read yet and they won't be able to fill out the questionnaire, the parent can do it. And that helps you catch things like, is this school avoidance? Is this separation anxiety? Is this generalized anxiety? And help provide appropriate treatment for those things. So if you think that there might be anxiety, there's definitely tools we can use, even for young children, to help tease that apart.
yeah, perfect. There's so many tools for adults and kids that are
Mhm.
oftentimes just not used, right? Like, but that can shed
Yeah,
so much light onto what's actually happening. So I'm glad you brought
yeah,
that up. So
yeah.
can we talk a little bit about the physiology of anxiety, like what's
Mhm.
happening in the body during an anxiety response? And you alluded to the fact that a little bit of anxiety is actually normal, and but it's when it renders us kind of non-functional, or if it really gets in the way of our lives, then that's not normal. So can we hit on some of the physiology that's going on underneath that?
For sure. Yeah. So I usually start with the nervous system when we're talking about anxiety. Like anything in the body, we're whole people. So all of our systems are talking to each other. So really, anxiety affects the whole body. But to understand where it starts from, it's easiest to start from the nervous system. We want to be spending a lot of our time in the parasympathetic state of our nervous system. So that's the rest and digest part. That's where we're relaxed, we're able to digest our food, and ideally we want to spend most of our time there. And then we've got this other branch of our nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system, and that's our fight, flight, and freeze response. That's the one that comes on when we're in danger to protect us. And ideally we're spending not very much time in this like fight or flight response. Now, unfortunately, in our Western culture where we're like running all the time, we're always trying to be productive, we've got like kids here and work here and commitments coming out the wazoo, we end up spending a lot more time in that stress response, even just to like get through all these things we're supposed to be doing. And certainly current global events are pushing us into that stress response because it is scary. One of the things that I've been really focusing on making sure people understand right now is that your brain is designed to be with other humans. And that is left over from our hunter-gatherer days, when if you were off by yourself as a human, you were unsafe. That was an unsafe place to be. We needed to be together with other humans to be safe. And so right now, being physically distant from each other, it's sending a lot of folks into a place of fear. And this is like your neurobiology acting. It is not anything that you are doing wrong. That's just what happens. And so we need to work on telling ourselves new stories so we can rewire those parts of our brains that are feeling unsafe right now. But it's natural to, even though it's not true, it's natural to feel unsafe when being separated. And so those things push our nervous system into that fight or flight response, which then has a whole hormonal cascade of releasing cortisol, of increasing our blood sugar. And there's lots of really smart reasons why your body does all this, because it's wanting you to be able to run from a bear or fight a bear. And you can tell which one your body is doing about whether you get hot or cold. And so when you get hot, your body's preparing to run from the bear because it's increased the blood flow to your muscles. And when your body gets cold in response to anxiety, your body is preparing to fight the bear because it's constricted the blood vessels in your limbs in order so that if it gets bit by the bear, you won't bleed to death. And so it's super cool and really adaptive. Unfortunately, there's no bear.
Yeah.
So all of this, like blood sugar so that your muscles can run, and the changes that are happening in your blood pressure, like all of that just leads to like cardiovascular disease and metabolic syndrome. So it's not helpful to a modern body to spend. One, it's not a helpful response in the moment for a lot of the complex problems that we're trying to solve. And then secondly, it's not a great long-term health strategy to spend a lot of time in this stress state.
For sure. I love how you explained that, because I think that we think about these things and anxiety as being like, just anxiety and not having this impact on our whole body, because like you said, nothing in our body works in isolation. There's interconnectedness, there's crosstalk happening all the time. That's how our bodies work, essentially, right? Like one system will depend on another system and another system and another system, and together they work. So you painted this picture of all these changes that are happening. So now, how do we get out of this state? How can we train ourselves to or implement strategies to bring us to a state of more calm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that is what I am most passionate about, is helping people find the moments of calm in their life. And so I'm so glad you asked that. Thank you. And what I like, where I start everybody is with lifestyle, because there's so much that we can do at home for ourselves. And it's really hard to know where to get started, especially if you're in moments of anxiety. And so the first thing that I have everybody do is take a list of their toolkit and really start with like, okay, what do I already know about what I need to be calm? What am I already using? And thinking back, especially right now, to times in your life where you did something hard, because we're all doing something hard right now. Some of us are doing harder things than others. I get that we're all in the same boat, but the storm is hitting some of us harder than it's hitting others. So wherever you are right now, it's helpful to think about when you did hard things and what helped you, and particularly what helped you that you were able to do. And so for me, one of the things I'm remembering back is when I had a family member that was in a critical care unit. And that was a very uncertain time for myself. And so some of the things that I did during that time was practicing gratitude. So I would look for the tiniest things moment to moment to enjoy. So for example, right now it's like sunny, there's sun coming in the window, and I'm just like, how wonderful and warm is the sun right now? And like little moments like that, like how good did my shampoo smell this morning? You know, like any little bit of joy to move me through that uncertainty. And so you should look back at your life and think like, when did I do something hard and what were the things that got me through? And especially now that our routines have been all jumbled up and we're settling back down into what's going to be our current routine for a period of time, is to think of the pieces from your old routine that were really helpful and figure out how to pull them in or something like them in, right? So if you had a regular walk or a regular yoga practice, or you're going to the gym, how can you make something like that happen in your life as it is right now? And it's not going to be the same, and no one's expecting it to be the same, but pulling in those pieces of things you already had going for you is a great way to build a foundation. And then when we move on from that, we look at like, what else do we need in order to be able to manage our lifestyle in a way that sets our physiology up, that it's less likely to run down the anxiety pathway, right? And so for me, there's 5 pillars. The first is nutrition. We want to make sure that we're eating to balance our blood sugar, that our brain has all the nutrients it could ever need, that we are like runneth over with omegas and with magnesium and all those wonderful calm things. So our body's not searching for anything that it could need to be to like create a physiologic calm. Second thing is movement. I don't really like the word exercise because like it doesn't really matter what it is, but if you're moving your body, that is the best anxiolytic out there. It is, oh, there's nothing like it. Sleep. So restoring those good sleep patterns, prayer or mindfulness. So there's lots of different ways to practice that. And a lot of my practice is figuring out what each person's best way is to engage in a practice like that. But having something that centers you and pulls you away from distraction is really helpful for managing anxiety. And the last thing we talk about is connection. And I'm talking about that a lot with physical distancing, because already it's kind of an overlooked pillar. And right now, it can be really hard to find those pieces to replace that with. But it's more important now than ever. So those are sort of the things we put in place to help create that calm.
For sure. And I love those 5 pillars because those 5 pillars also form the foundation of health in general, right?
Right. They are. And
Yeah.
that's just it. It's like a lot of times we think like this is our mind, but it's our body, and they are one and the same. And so, sometimes I'm talking to people and they're like, well, I want to support my mental health, but I also really care about my immune system, or I also really care about my hormones. And I'm like, well, this is why we start here, because when we correct these things and we put these building blocks into place, so many of the other things start to heal themselves. And then we can go through and be like, oh, you actually need more anti-inflammation support to manage your anxiety, or you're actually needing help focusing, so let's work on that, or your periods need to be better managed in a way that like the lifestyle is going to sustain them over time, but we need to do some intervention to move things further. So that's sort of how all those things come in together.
And you mentioned periods, and I love talking about periods, and we've talked
Everybody
about
loves to talk about
periods.
periods.
Yeah, we both like talking about periods. So, can we talk about the menstrual cycle and how the fluctuations in our hormones during our cycle can impact our mental health? That could be anxiety, that could be low mood, energy, like all of those things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think one of the things we really know about women's health and menstrual cycle and anxiety is progesterone. And so when progesterone is lower, we have more anxiety. And interestingly, this is true on a populational level. So women who have generally lower progesterone have more anxiety. And it's also true on an individual woman to woman level. So when my progesterone falls, I am more likely to experience anxiety in my menstrual cycle. And so really supporting women's health hormones and supporting progesterone health is key to managing anxiety. And I just want to tie this into some of the anxiety physiology we were talking about earlier. When we go into that stress response state and we're releasing that cortisol has to come from somewhere if we weren't making it before. And as I know Anne was talking about earlier this week, about some crazy periods some women have been having with all this stress, cortisol hijacks your progesterone. It's just like you don't get enough progesterone when you're making extra cortisol. The pathways just don't let it all happen at once. They hijack it. And so that hijacks your body's like calm women's hormone and turns it into your stress women's hormone.
For sure. And we release progesterone after we ovulate. So women who aren't ovulating, and stress is a common cause of not ovulating also, then we can't make progesterone to feel calm. Like after ovulation, our estrogen and progesterone go up, and progesterone is that calm hormone. And as a society, I feel like we tend to be a little bit lower on the progesterone, a little bit higher on the estrogen, and
Mhm.
that exacerbates PMS. And that's why we've been having so much crazy PMS this past month.
Crazy PMS time. Crazy
It's
PMS
true.
time.
Yeah. I've been hearing it I'm sure you're hearing it too, like so many women. And then you add in, the alcohol, and then the lack of movement, and the maybe eating too much chips and chocolate and all of those things.
Mhm.
And that worsens it. Can we talk about one
Yeah.
more thing before we move on? I want to talk about
Yeah.
caffeine. How
Yeah.
does caffeine contribute to or play into anxiety?
Yeah. So caffeine is what I call fuel for the anxiety fire. Um, it it increases cortisol by itself. So when you have some coffee, it gives you kind of like that jolt. What I am recommending during this time is that you're just like mindful of your caffeine use. And I'm saying at this time, like that's always my starter point. Is like just pay attention to how you feel after a coffee, and be really watchful of if your caffeine tolerance has changed, and be aware that it can change day to day. Like, it's hard to give a concrete example of like the right now. But I always think of people like presentations and meetings. If you wake up in the morning and you're someone that's got like mild anxiety, and you've got a sales meeting that day, or you've got to like present your findings at work, or it's a really big day for you in your personal life, there's something that's going on for one of your kids that you have like a bit of anxiety about, like a doctor's appointment or something like that, like you can hold off your caffeine until that's done. Usually, even if you're a regular coffee drinker, you won't get a headache if you postpone the coffee a couple hours or cut it in half. Just really consider that if your body's already making extra cortisol that day, that adding more caffeine to that is going to cause extra anxiety. So for myself, if I've got a presentation or if I'm speaking, um, I'll probably cut down on my caffeine that day. I've gone through periods of no caffeine, and certainly for some of my patients, that is the healthiest choice for them, is to cut down to zero. But I am more of a moderate, just on everything. I think it's a lot healthier to have a healthy balance in life when things are not completely off the table. And I think that's something I've learned from, my patients that have experienced eating disorders, whether that's binge eating, orthorexia, anorexia. I just think one of the things, the more I learn about disordered eating, one, the more prevalent I think it is in our world, especially. Yeah, I don't think we pay enough attention to, like, is this actually healthy? And to the restriction piece doesn't seem to lead to health in a mental way or in a physical way. So if you're into caffeine, I'm not going to tell you to never have it, but also being mindful about what that does to your body, because it is fuel for the anxiety fire.
For sure. And I find similar things in my practice. In what you were saying, there's a lot of disordered eating, or even just like impositions that we place upon ourselves when it comes to, and restrictions that we place upon ourselves with eating, that becomes really stressful. And that takes us out of that parasympathetic state that we need to digest our food, and takes us into a
Mm-hmm.
sympathetic state. Plus, like, the mind has so much control over the body. So even the way we then metabolize our food completely changes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's so interesting how everything really just comes together, and we have to have these in-depth conversations around like what is actually helpful for the person sitting in front of us. That becomes so important, instead
Yeah.
of saying, okay, no caffeine for you, because that can be also really stressful for someone, right? Saying that, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to have any coffee. How am I going to get through my day?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those conversations are super, super important. All right, so as we mentioned, we are doing this during COVID-19. What are some of the strategies that you're implementing in your life right now that are helping you get through this time and manage your anxiety?
Yeah. Well, first I put myself back through my anxiety program that I developed. So that I literally just was like, all right, Katie, we're doing the tracking, we're going back. So what that looks like in terms of how that's impacted my lifestyle right now, and like, I'm imperfect just like everybody else. And so I'm having my moments of locking myself in the bathroom so I can have a few breaths alone or have a couple tears. Like, and then I'm having other days where I'm like, dressed in on Zoom. So it's a work in progress. But what that looks like in terms of my day to day is I try and get up before my daughter. So I have a almost 4-year-old at home. And so she usually gets up at like around 7. So I try and get up at like 6:30. That gives me a couple of minutes where I breathe. Sometimes I say like I'm going to meditate. Sometimes I do yoga. But really what all those things have in common is I actually just spend some time breathing. And that is my best medicine. And for a lot of folks, that's the best medicine for their nervous system as well, is breath. And just being with the breath and practicing inhaling and exhaling. Then I got breakfast on the go. I'm working to get like veggies and fruits into my family and protein first thing in the morning. So try and get started on that. And then I have been just like making sure that we're eating regularly throughout the day. We're all home with kids right now. Like, they want to eat constantly. They always ask for snacks. Like, it's just insanity. And so I've like scheduled like 4 or 5 times a day when we eat. And I'm just prepping stuff and spending a lot of time cooking right now. If you don't have the time, it's totally fine. But do what you can to sort of eat regularly and make sure there's like protein and produce in your diet, so that will keep your blood sugar strong and your minerals high, which is what we need to get through this. Strong minerals and lots of balanced blood sugar. And then I've been really diligent with my sleep. So at 10 o'clock, everything that I'm doing gets shut down. Ideally, I would like to stop working sooner than that, but being home during a pandemic with my child is not always, sometimes that's the time I have to work, is after she goes to bed. So trying to shut things down at 10, make myself a cup of calming tea. So I have a nighttime tea that I drink. And then reading for like 20 to 30 minutes. I've been rereading Harry Potter. I find it comforting. So
Love Harry
that's
Potter.
something that you want to read, right? Like it doesn't have to be, I do read personal development books, but I don't read them before bed. I'm not really there for that. So I just kind of read something that's like, I know when cortisol is high, a lot of us look to things that are familiar. And in my practice, you know, this is like a bit of a warning sign for me, right? When my patients or myself are like rewatching things on Netflix or like rereading books. But during a time of collective anxiety right now, we just have to accept that like this is what we're going to be doing. And this is actually pretty healthy coping mechanism, because every time we expose ourselves to things that are new, if that is a trigger for cortisol. So it's okay that right now you're like, I'd actually just rather rewatch something or reread something because it's familiar to me. It's going to actually keep your cortisol from going really high. So I think it's adaptive.
I think so too. Honestly, like I'm in the middle of rewatching the Harry Potter series actually. And then my next step is to, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read the books again because I'm definitely craving that comfort. And for the first 10 days, like I couldn't get, like I have a bunch of books, you know, as always, on my to read list that I have sitting on my night table. I just couldn't get myself to read them. And I'm like, I would much rather go back to like Anne of Green Gables and read that again because it's the comfort piece, right? I don't want to be exposed to new things and like try to remember new things because like cortisol also like memory goes down, right? Like actually
Yeah,
goes
no,
down.
you're not going to retain new information when you're in a place of like fear or uncertainty. That's not how your brain works. You need to feel safe. And
Exactly.
so working on creating that sense of safety through routine, through ritual, um, is the best we can do right now, and we can do so much with that. And it's okay if it's not perfect. Every step counts, and the more consistent you are with these things, the more you build momentum, and the more that you can continue doing them. And so a lot of times when I'm helping people rebuild, restructure a lifestyle, there's this thought that like, oh, let's do it all. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to put in all the pillars. I'm going to have this like perfect morning routine. And a lot of times that's not, it's not effective. What is effective is picking one thing, doing that for a couple of days, and then, or even a week, and then adding in one more thing, and just working on one thing at a time. And when people build up their routines over like 6 to 12 weeks, they last much longer.
Yeah, and we've had a complete shift in our routine right now. So it's also totally okay to feel a little bit up and down as we move through it. Ups and downs are normal best of times, right? So, and these are not the best of times. These are the most bizarre of times. So,
The strangest of times.
it's true. Okay, Katie, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you? How can they connect with you? And I know you alluded to the fact that you put yourself through your program. Can you tell us a little bit about your program as well? Because I think we all need a little bit of
For
help in our life.
sure. Yeah. So the first place that I want to invite you to all come hang out is in my Facebook group. It's called Creating Calm in the Chaos. It's 2 years old, but oh, can you hear me? My internet seems to be popping.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. It was like connection unstable. Joys of the computer. But anyway, the Facebook group is called Creating Calm in the Chaos. And I'm hanging out in there, and we are finding joy moments and moments of laughter to help us move from place to place. And we're going to be focusing this month on building momentum, because a lot of us had our momentum crashed. All our habits are gone. A lot of us are looking for motivation. And it's not going to push us through. It's hard to be motivated right now. So we need to have some momentum instead. And then the other place that if you need more support, I am running my online program right now. This is something that I usually have available for people to run through themselves. And what how it works is there's video modules for each of the 5 pillars, spread out over 6 weeks. And so you can do an assessment and find out where your pillars are at, and then each week do videos to help you figure out how to strengthen those pillars uniquely for you. So each of the worksheets for each week is around cultivating that based on where you are and where you want to go. So it's not prescriptive, it's exploratory. That's always available. But what I'm doing this month is for everybody that signs up, we have some bonuses, because I think this time is just really needed and people need more support now. So whereas like if everything was going fine, you could probably implement these things on your own. Right now I'm finding people need more support. And so the more support that we're bringing in right now is a one-on-one call with me after you've done your pillars assessment, to have my eyes on that so you can see like where are things going well right now and what pillar do you need to focus on first, and really build up. The other thing we're doing is weekly Q&As. And so there's just a lot of chance to ask others and ask me how those pillars are going. And then we're also rolling out app coaching support right now. And we're doing so you'll be able to track your pillars on an app and chat with me about them. And so we're just like, honestly, I've never offered this type of support ever before in this program. We're not increasing the price of it. I just really want everyone to be able to access and implement this right now, because it is literally what's getting me through. It's what's getting my patients through that I've already trained on this. I'm checking in on them, and the ones that have graduated and are implementing this are saying stuff like, oh, I'm fine. I'm just using the things you got me. And so when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, everybody needs this right now. And so we're just bringing in all the support we can to help folks during this time.
Perfect. I'll throw the links to those in the description for the video, so people can connect with you and hang out with you and learn more from you, because I know you have a lot to offer. I know you helped me too, a lot. So thank you, Katie, once again for being here and for sharing your wisdom with us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Anne. It's been my absolute pleasure. Yeah, I don't have enough nice things to say about you and your friendship through this like crazy time. And I know that your patients are just like so lucky to have you as their support person right now.
Thank you, and right back at you.
Thanks, Anne.